NHL playoffs are here. Ranger fans are going crazy. Islander fans are really being sour. A lot of people favorite to win the Stanley Cup this year was the Islanders. After starting the season the way they did, not having any home games for the first month, 11,000 miles traveling, and then the COVID situation where they lost 9 players in a 3-week span, it affected them. They didn't make the playoffs. They made a run at the end of the season. Islander fans, this team is going to be back in the playoffs, I believe, next year after a full season playing at home. But it's the New York Rangers time, man. Going into the playoffs, they have one of the best defensemen in the NHL, who was the Norris Trophy winner last year in Fox, Long Island native, Shesterkin, who has been the best goaltender throughout the regular season, who's probably going to win Goalie of the Year, Vezina Trophy winner. They got a player that nobody would have thought in Kreider to score 50 goals in a season. The last couple of years, he hasn't come even close to even 35 goals, and he's had a sensational year offensively under Gallant. And even Panarin, who everybody said had an off year, still had one of those good years with 70 assists. This team has played great team hockey. One of the best goals against throughout the league. Who would have thought that when they had one of the worst defenses in the league last year? So that tells you what Gallant is and what he preaches. But going into this series, you look at the Rangers and you look at the youth on this team. Obviously, the experience goes to the Penguins. With Sidney Crosby, Letang, Malkin, all these guys played 400 and some odd periods in their playoff history. Going into this series, the Rangers were the favorites because they were the most talented. And everybody is afraid of Sid Crosby because Sid always gets the call. And the Rangers, throughout this series, they haven't been getting the call. I think they've had 3 power plays to the Penguins 12. But going into this series, if you're a Ranger fan, you should be excited because they match up as well as any of these teams in the first round against their opponent.
You could definitely tell the youth versus experience battle is winning with depth for the Rangers. If they were just doing top on top, they have the talent advantage, but like you're saying, the Penguins have the experience advantage, and that experience is still playing well. Sidney Crosby playing great. Jake Guentzel's playing great. Chris Letang's played well. Like, these guys are playing well. It's just the rest of the team has not been, the depth guys have not been there for the Penguins, and that was to be expected. They've had some cap issues since they've won the Stanley Cup. They traded for Raquel at the trade deadline. He got hurt in game 1 on a big hit by Lindgren that he should have gotten ejected for. That other depth really hasn't come through yet for Pittsburgh, where it has for the Rangers. Andrew Kopp's been a great trade deadline acquisition since they got him. He scored in game 2. Frank Vetrano scored in game 1, game 2, assisted on 2 other goals. He's really helped elevate these other players, this other young depth that the Rangers were supposed to have. Guys like Hedl and Kakko and Lafreniere that had down regular seasons.
They were horrible. All of them were horrible.
They're not scoring prolifically, but they're still playing better with these guys in the lineup.
They played sensational together in the second game of this series.
Right. Really, all of that has to do with Vetrano and Kopp, the way they've elevated this team. The Rangers have lacked center depth for years. Vetrano's not a pure center. Kopp kind of emerged into it recently, but still hasn't played that way his whole career. But the Rangers need all they can get, not having these face-off guys. They were the worst Eastern Conference playoff team when it comes to winning face-offs. They're doing that even better in this series. And they're overcoming the lack of bad non-calls and just bad calls. Yes, there was some controversy in game 1. Definitely surprised that goal was overturned because it was called a goal on the ice. It was a tough call, close call, but it was surprising they didn't have enough evidence to overturn it. But nevertheless, they bounced back and won in game 2 and blew them out.
Absolutely. And right now, going into Pittsburgh, they have the advantage because Domingue is going to be the starting goaltender throughout the rest of this playoffs. Jari's out. Smith is out after getting hurt in the overtimes. And if he gets hurt, you're going to your 4th-string goalie. That was your AHL backup goaltender. So the advantage definitely goes to the Rangers. They have the most talent, the by far better goaltender. Having the momentum to go into Pittsburgh is definitely an advantage when it comes to hockey. As far as the playoffs, the Panthers series, who would have thought that this series would be tied 1-1? Panthers have been the best team throughout the NHL all season long, offensively, defensively, goaltending. They've been unbelievable. All around talented, one of the best penalty killing teams, one of the best power play teams in the NHL. I know this series is 1-1. The advantage goes to the Capitals because they have the experience. This Florida Panther team is still fairly young. They have a bunch of great talented young players on this team, but they haven't been here. They haven't done it like this Washington team has done it year in and year out. This is the same Washington team and a lot of the same players that won a Stanley Cup with Barry Trotz before Barry Trotz went to the New York Islanders.
Yeah, it's a matter of can the Panthers youngsters play well? And so far they have. Capitals won game 1. The Panthers blew a 2-1 lead, and they learned from their adversity. And most of the guys that scored for Florida in game 2, a lot of them were young players. Lundell is a rookie, Mason Marchment, Carter Verhaeghe, and their defense, which I thought was the biggest flaw for them going into the season. They trade for Ben Sherratt at the trade deadline. line. Ekblad and Uyghur are great. The question is, can they get the other guys going? And finally, they have the goaltending. We haven't been able to say that for the Florida Panthers since your boy, Van Beesbrook.
That's right. And they do have the goaltender, and Bobrovsky. Sensational all season long. And he's always been sensational. When he was on the Blue Jackets, he's been one of the best goalies, one of the top 5 goaltenders in the NHL. These Russian goaltenders are the best in the world. The goaltender that he's playing against was a top prospect in Samsonov, another Russian goaltender. We talk about Shesterkin, and then with the Tampa Bay Lightning, who I believe is the best goaltender throughout the NHL, in Vasilevsky. And by the way, that series is 2-1 Maple Leafs. It tells you a lot about this Maple Leafs team. Now, does the Maple Leafs have a chance to win this series? I think they do. This is not the same Lightning team with the depth that they had over the last couple of years. Lost a couple players. One of them went to the Rangers, but they still have the core of players there. Stamkos and Vasilevsky, Hedman. This Lightning team is talented. But what the Maple Leafs have not done since John Tavares has been there is win a series. And they have a chance. If they knock off the Lightning are still one of the more dangerous teams in the Eastern Conference. Could the Maple Leafs go to the Eastern Conference Championship and maybe go to the Stanley Cup Finals in the first time in 100 years? Maybe. They're talented. They have Matthews, who's one of the best goal scorers in the NHL. I hate to say it, John Tavares is one of the best all-around players offensively in the NHL. Martyr is a great player. This is a good team, and they had one of the best goalies in the NHL in Campbell.
The talent has never been the problem with the Maple Leafs. It's just a matter of can they get a playoff identity and overcome the pressure, because Toronto is probably the Canadian equivalent of the big market that gets all the pressure. It has the harsh media. Toronto's that Canadian equivalent.
It's the New York of Canada.
Yeah, this is the time for them to, if they want to prove themselves, to do it against the defending 2-time Stanley Cup champions. I'm not going to believe it until I actually see it. Even if they are up 3-1, based on what happened last year, I'm still not going to believe it. But they have a lot of talent.
They go up 3-1. There's no way they're going to choke.
You would hope, but it's the Leafs. But they do trade for some veterans to help out that team. Mark Giordano's been a nice addition since coming over from Seattle. Young depth finally with their offense too. Michael Bunting had a very nice rookie year for them. David Kampf, former Ranger Colin Blackwell. If they could somehow pull this off, that would be one of the biggest playoff reversals you'll see.
Carolina and the Bruins. I expect this series to be very, very close, even though Carolina, I think, is the best all-around team. The Bruins winning game number 3 was so very important. Maybe it was the goaltending. A lot of people thought Swayman was the better goaltender of both of them. I don't know why they started with Ullmark over Swayman, but Swayman played in game number 3 and they win the game 4-2. Are they going to stick with Swayman? Probably. Getting that win at home for their first win of the playoffs is very big. Carolina still is going to have the advantage. They have the better all-around team. They're one of the more talented teams in the NHL. But here's the thing. They lost their 2 top goaltenders in Ranta and Anderson. They're playing their third-string goaltender, and that's the problem right now. If you look at what's going on in these series, you look at the Rangers series, you look at this series, if you don't have consistent goaltending, you don't have a chance in the playoffs. And you're seeing the difference of what goaltending can do when you have a great goaltender.
Hurricanes had to go to Peter Kochetkov for game 2 and played very well. Give him a lot of credit, even overcame being cross-checked by Brad Marchand. The Hurricanes are, skater-wise, the deepest team in the Eastern Conference, and they have great defense. They've had a great defensive identity for a while, even bringing a couple ex-Rangers that really fell off badly. They've played serviceable enough with the Hurricanes, and to go along with Jacob Slavin, to go along with Ian Cole's been a good veteran. The offense, we know they're loaded too. Aho, Teravainen, Svechnikov, Niederreiter, they got everything. The Bruins, they're going to have to hope their top line can really carry them because they don't have the same depth they have in years past.
As far as the Western Conference, the Avalanche are up right now with the Predators 2-0. I expected this. The Avalanche is the best all-around team in the NHL. With the firepower they have and Joe Sakic running that organization, this team has just gotten better and better. One of the best young goaltenders in the NHL. They have one of the best defensemen in the NHL. They have 2 of the best offensive players in the NHL in McKinnon. They're fun to watch. I expect the Avalanche to go all the way to the Stanley Cup Finals. Last year, a lot of people thought they were the Stanley Cup predominant champion, and they fell apart in the second round. I do not expect that to happen this year. As far as the Wild and the Blues, I really like the Blues in this series. This is the Stanley Cup champions a couple of years ago. They still have practically the same team they had when they won the Stanley Cup championships. Craig Berube is still there, and this team plays great team defense. I expect this series to go 6 to 7 games. The Wild has been sensational all year, especially in the second half. Their goaltender in the second half of the season have been as good as any goaltender throughout the league. The Wild could win this series, and they're still very, very dangerous.
I love the way the Wild are built. They have a good mixture of everything. They made a lot of good trades in order to rebuild. They were a lot like the Islanders like 5 years ago, surviving all those bad contracts, but they made a lot of good trades. They brought in Kevin Fiala, Ryan Hartman, a lot of these good young players, and then Matt Boldy, Kirill Kaprizov, guys guys they drafted have been sensational. Kaprizov had the first, I think, 45-goal year in their history, but they also have great defense. Brodin and Dumba, they have a good mixture of everything, and they finally have the goaltending. Fleury and Talbot, too. Both have a lot of good playoff experience. Fleury's been bad at certain points, too, so we'll see if that could last, but I love the way this team is built. The Blues, I think they're still very talented. They're going to be a tough out. I don't know if they have the same depth they have in years past. That's what happens when you win the Stanley Cup. A lot of the times you have to trade people off. So I would still probably favor Minnesota, but if the Blues do advance, they're going to be a tough out too, even against the Avalanche, who are deep, but can they survive the second round? It's another question.
Calgary and Dallas, I love Calgary in this series. I think Calgary is the fastest team in the NHL. They have some great players in Goudreau and Tkachuk. Matthew Tkachuk, who had over 40 goals this year. He's had his best year. Good young goaltending. If Calgary gets out of this series, I would love to see Calgary versus the Avalanche in the Western Conference Championship. I would love to see that. These are two fun teams to watch. They're fast. They're young.
It's weird to think the Avalanche actually played them as an 8 seed 3 years ago, and they beat them in 5 games when the Flames were a 1. This is kind of the opposite of what we're seeing with a lot of these higher scoring series. This has been the lower scoring. 2 shutouts so far. Great goaltending throughout. Dallas, I would not sleep on either. They don't have the same star power as years past, but they still have a lot of great depth, and they still have a lot of great defense, and that can win in the playoffs too. This series is going to be pesky, physical type hockey. When you look at the winner of this series, I think they match up very well to go very far. The Flames are very loaded throughout. I don't really trust the Oilers or the Kings. That's who they would have to play next. Both these teams have great depth. This is going to be a very hard fought out series. Dallas is not going to go away easily.
As far as the Oilers and the LA Kings, I didn't think LA should have made the playoffs. I think they're the weakest team out of all the teams in the NHL playoffs. The fact that the Oilers are tied 1-1 with the firepower that they have, with Connor McDavid, the best player in hockey, probably the second or third best player in Draisaitl, another great offensive talent. The fact that this team is tied 1-1 against the LA Kings that have so many weaknesses offensively, and they're just an older team. Jonathan Quick at one point was one of the great goaltenders in the NHL. He's now a veteran goaltender on his way out. Everybody expects the Oilers to win this series, but don't count the LA Kings out. We've seen this before, and the Oilers are a choke artist team over the last couple of years.
The Kings are a mixture. The core is like the Penguins, old but experienced, but they also are kind of like the Rangers last year, where they have a lot of young players all at once that they took a good step. Now, the division's weak. I don't think anyone expected Vegas to miss the playoffs at the start of the year.
Nobody thought LA was going to make it.
No, I think everyone was expecting Vegas and Calgary, and then it was a wild card of who that third team was going to be, whether it was Edmonton, whether it was a team like the Sharks who underperformed this year. They're playing with nothing to lose. The Oilers have all the pressure on them. McDavid, best player in the hockey, Draisaitl, top 5. When are they finally going to get going? They've won 1 playoff series.
If they lose this series, maybe they have to trade one, maybe Draisaitl. If they can't win with both these guys, they have to bring in players that work for this roster to really take it to the next level. As good as these two players are, it's just not working. If they don't get out of this round against the LA Kings, they've won 1 series.
Been in the league for 7 years.
All right, and they've won one playoff
series in McDavid's second year.
And Draisaitl's been on the team for what, 5? And they have won 1. So what does that tell you? Maybe they need to move one of them. I don't think they're moving Connor McDavid. He's the superstar of the team. He's the face of hockey right now. Draisaitl, he's a big name. Teams would absolutely give a bunch of good players back for him. The Oilers are not that team. I think if they somehow lose this series against the LA Kings, they're going to have to look into the offseason on where they are and what they're going to do moving forward as an organization.
I agree. This has to be the final straw to lose to a team that was supposed to be rebuilding.